Hello, my name is Kelly and welcome to Women at Iowa, a place where the University of Iowa community can take pride in the accomplishments of the women who call it home. My guest today is an associate professor of sculpture at the School of Art and Art History at the university. She's also an internationally renowned artist who specializes in taking mundane, everyday objects and transforming them into spectacular art that make us question our identity and relationships with these objects. So please help me in welcoming Isabel Barbuzza. Bienvenidos a Women at Iowa.
Gracias.
Yeah.
Thanks. Hi.
I found it so interesting when I was reading about you and learning about you that you come from Argentina and you had quite a long path that kind of led you to Iowa.
Yes.
That led you to finalize here. Do you want to start at the beginning and tell us about growing up in Argentina and how that shaped your passion for art and sculpture?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was born in Mendoza, Argentina, which is, in the mountains, in the Andes Mountains.
Right.
And Mendoza is a large city, and I lived there until I was 20. When I was 20, I moved to the United States. But there, I went to public schools, was exposed to art through books.
Right.
Everything that I know about art was through books, because, we didn't have access to museums with major,
Right.
works of art. So, and I was encouraged by my parents to be, to pursue art. It wasn't something like, oh, you won't make money or anything like that. But no, on the contrary, I was very, encouraged to pursue art. My father was a doctor, an orthopedic doctor, and at some point I thought about, going to medical school. But he said, do something that it's more creative, and so I never forget that. So anyway, I, in elementary school and high school, I went to after-school programs, very involved in the arts, and then at 17 I started college, and it was during the difficult years in Argentina. Some people refer to it. When we had the dictatorship in Argentina, from 1974 up to 84, 75 to 84. So I went to art school during an extremely difficult time. When I was in the first year, they fired all the professors who belonged to the left, and we had to be searched every time we went to school on bus. They were the blacklists of, the military had blacklists, and if your name was there, you knew that you were in trouble. And it was really, very dangerous, really, to live there. Friends started to disappear. A friend of mine disappeared, and then the following week, his wife, who was pregnant, and up till now,
don't know what happened.
They haven't found the bodies. I mean, that's the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
So 30,000 people disappeared from Argentina, one generation above me. And so we lived in that, that world of paranoia, fear. You always had to carry your IDs. You always had to be on a group. You were, harassed all the time. I have, in a particular case, a police dressed as a civilian followed me for 3 months. And every time that, or most of the time that he went by my house and I was out there, he, put us against the wall and searched for art.
Why were you followed?
Well, what happened is a lot of people, through the police, they got power. And so it could be because he just wanted to, follow me, or I didn't have any real political implications. I thought about it, but, things were getting very complicated.
Right.
So he just wanted to, he wasn't a very abusive type of thing. There were a lot of things like that. So if, I was young and I was an art student, at the time there were, posters that they were very explicit, saying how a woman should dress and how a man should dress in order to be, you know.
Really?
Yes. And so here was, you know, curly hair didn't go with it. Art student didn't go with it. So, you know, we were constantly harassed, and also, you know, the fact that we heard, you know, that they were taking people away and they were torturing. And most of Argentina said, no, that's not happening in our country. We live in a safe country. And then, you know, things came to reality, and there, you know, there were books written about the types of torture they did. And
well, so you were still making art throughout this time. What kind of art did you create during this period?
Yeah, that's a great question. Of course, it was extremely traditional, right. You know, because we had all the faculty members or the professors who were, you know, outside the box, as a way of saying, right. You know, they were fired, so they couldn't go to school. So the art that was taught at the university was very traditional, you know, classical, which is fine, you know, you could learn, but there wasn't any room for experimentation. Yeah, right. And the thing that it was very interesting that I always refer to when I give a talk about my work, I was doing printmaking at the time. Yeah. Well, I was very young. I mean, I was at the beginning of, you know, being an art student, so I was very interested in sculpture, but also printmaking. And printmaking was an art that was democratic, inexpensive to make. If you have a print, you can make, you know, 50. You can pass them out. A lot of the political problems were dealt through humor. So you see a lot of, you know, cartoons and graffiti during that time that dealt with the political situation. Right. And so I was very, very interested in printmaking and doing a lot of things about printmaking. So I was more in that department, let's say. But, you know, I always had my interest in the 3D world and so forth. But I thought printmaking, and a lot of us thought that printmaking was a way of really having art being a medium that can pass on a lot of information. Right. Yeah.
Do any of the classical types of art that you were trained in initially, does any of that appear in your works now?
Well, not necessarily, but you know, I think I have a great foundation in terms of drawing and painting, printmaking, and sculpture, and I think, you know, they are with me, and not that I went into, you know, a more classical type of painting or drawing, but yeah, of course, I mean, it's part of that. I'm glad that, you know, I came here and I had the opportunity to experiment with other mediums too. Right. So.
And what made you decide to go to the United States? I understand you went to California initially?
Well, I got married and my ex-husband was doing all the paperwork to come to the United States, the green card. His father is from New York, so, you know, and things were so bad in Argentina. And I said, sure, you know, let's go to the United States. Yeah. And we moved to Santa Barbara. We went from Mendoza, Argentina to Santa Barbara, California, because his family was there. Right. And then, you know, I got it I was there, I didn't speak English. So, you know, it was like, even though my mother, you know, was an English professor, but
kind of trial by fire going in there.
Yeah. So you know, it was an interesting thing at the beginning. So I started learning about living in the United States. And
when we were communicating before, you had told me when you came to the United States, you had a bunch of kind of odd jobs. You were a mother, and you were also cleaning. What all did you do?
Well, mother is not an odd job. To be a mother. I think you know that's a job that I continue to do.
Of course.
Yes. So, well, the first thing I did was to work in a factory, which you know, it was an electronic factory, and it was quite interesting because, you know, here I come with my socialist ideas, and you know that we all have to be part of, you know, what the world is about. Right. So it was very interesting, and it was a learning experience. Of course, you know, I knew that I wasn't going to be there for the rest of my life. So, you know, I met a lot of people. I bonded really well with the Mexican community. There were a lot of people from Mexico at the time, Chicanos also, and learning about, you know, other cultures as well. it's ridiculous how they exploit people.
Yeah.
I mean, minimum wage, and you do a lot of work, and it doesn't get recognized. So to me, it was a very interesting way of learning about how factories work. How you have to operate in those situations. So, and then from there, I think I was pregnant, so I had my daughter, and then I had my son. I babysat, I delivered newspapers with my kids. I was going to City College to art school. So that was really interesting because I will go to drawing classes, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And then thinking about it, and then, so many other jobs, I don't know if you know, but Santa Barbara is an extremely expensive town.
Really?
Yeah, very expensive. Well, Oprah Winfrey has a home there. So anyway, and then I decided to go back to school. And so I signed up for UCSB. I was accepted, and I had to do more art classes, and of course English and composition, the whole thing. I loved it. I never knew how amazing American universities were. I think in the bio that you sent me, I said that one thing that I discovered were the libraries. And I was blown away, like, this is knowledge, like you have so much, and you can have access to, incredible things, interlibrary loans. And
you had also mentioned when you'd come to the United States that you saw a difference in the artwork. And
yes.
Can you explain a little bit about how you felt coming from your training and your experience with art in Argentina, and then coming to the United States and taking art classes here?
Well, I started school in 1982, I think. And so the work that I was doing, it was very political. It was about the human condition. It was about, all the things that my experiences living in Argentina, disappearing. And I was here, and I will hear about more that they were, the torture centers were all of a sudden coming up, and so we had more information about that. And I couldn't understand how you make art that is not connected to the situation, the global situation, what's going on in the world. So I was very frustrated in the sense that, questioning about what is art and what it should communicate and so forth. So it was a little difficult to kind of understand that. But on the other hand, I was exposed to installation art, for example. A wonderful artist was teaching there, Anne Hamilton, and some other some other wonderful artists. And so I open up and, so that you can express things in a different way. So, but that was the major crisis that I had. That coming from Argentina, where you have to make art that it's about, a reality. The artist should represent what the world is all about and should communicate something. That was my, training of what all the artists did during that time. And, otherwise it was art for art's sake. So that was kind of the two, the two extremes. And so it took me some time to adapt to that. But on the other hand, I felt liberated, and I felt in the sense that, I have to question what other medias are there, what other artists that have been doing. And so it gave me a lot of freedom too, and that also that you can be political, not necessarily doing a political theme, but your artwork can be. It has different meanings.
It's funny that you say when you're in Argentina, you had to make things that reflected reality, what was real.
Right.
When you see in any of your works, you take reality and make it something that is so much bigger than the sum of all the little parts. And I think one that's really coming to mind is you had a sculpture, umbilical cord.
Right.
The long wire where you had letters from your family. From Argentina and friends, all kind of stacked together. What was that like to you, making that piece, making something that was so connected to your home and to your history back in Argentina?
Well, I have the piece here. I don't know if we're going to look at the images or...
Yeah, we can.
That piece in particular, dark, using the figure, printmaking, things that were kind of, a little more aggressive.
Right.
And then I started, working with books. But going back to your question, umbilical cord, because, the way that I communicated with my family was through phone or through letters.
Yeah.
And I made that piece right at the cusp of internet, of email, because, not only I was, missing my family and so forth, but also the moment that, you sit down and write letters. And sometimes, when you write letters, you might cry and you have a tear coming. Right.
Can't do that on an email.
No, you can't. You can, certainly. So I had all these letters, and so what I did is I dipped them in wax, and I made this form. I was experimenting with paper and wax, and I made this form, and it became an umbilical cord. And then I put it's on copper, and there was a lot of copper in Argentina in the mountains, going to Chile especially, you see a lot of the copper through the mountain. And it was that somehow that idea that, the time that we have to spend writing letters was disappearing. So it was a kind of a nostalgic piece in a way.
Right.
So, I attach all the letters, my family's letters around the cord, per se. So that was, what I made. But it was right at the transition of email and how we communicate. Right. And now I don't write letters, basically. Yeah. And they don't. My sister and brother, they don't. It's email or phone.
Are they still in Argentina, your sister and brother?
My brother's still in Argentina. My sister, we are 3 sisters and 1 brother. All the sisters left. At some point. We all left Argentina, and then one of my sisters was living in Barcelona, and now she's back in Mendoza.
Okay.
But it was very interesting because all the girls left.
Are the other sisters in the United States as well?
Yes, yeah. Both of them lived here for a while, and I have a sister right now in Massachusetts, so she lives there. She has her family and so forth. So we always say, wow, the 3 of us, took off and left. Yeah. So.
Now, I'm looking at some of the pictures that are coming up here. I see the redesigning your library piece, the one about where you basically took found books and discarded books and created them into clothing. I understand, I don't know where this exactly stemmed from. You had written your thesis on using the book as a sculpture object.
Yeah.
But where was the kind of the advent of using books in your sculptures?
Well, I have a very specific time, and actually the book that, we're seeing here, it's the book that really triggered all that. I was very interested in bookmaking at the University of California, and I was studying with Harry Reese, who's a wonderful bookmaker and printmaker. And I learned how to make books, and I learned how to make paper, and I learned how to, set the type and so forth. And there's you fall in love with those things. It's very difficult to explain, but, it's a wonderful process. And during that time, so I'm talking about the 80s, the library, the arts library, was getting rid, and the library, I think the main library too, was getting rid of books because they didn't have readers. There were books that they weren't checked out. They were obsolete because, in particular, the book that I'm using was an algebra book from the 19th century. So all the information was old.
Right.
And we didn't recycle books at that time for the paper. And so they gave us a whole bunch of books and say, well, do whatever you want. And Harry Reese and Stephen Corwright and other artists were working with books. And so we started exploring the idea of the book, and we alter books, as we call. And I don't know, I felt like, a book is such a beautiful thing, and I started playing with the paper because, it was an old book. And so I made a dress out of the book. And then I said, well, this will be very interesting if I can put it back in the book format. So that's what, we're seeing here, and that's the book. So I have the book. I made a structure that it's a kimono, basically, and then you can fold the book and put it, and see you have all the books here that open up as kimono, but then they can be folded back and put back in the redesign of my library. This is the first, it's kind of a prototype that I did. So I started collecting books, founding books, and I found a lot of books. about love stories, because those are consumed very fast.
Right.
You know, you
And kind
read
of
one,
discarded.
boom.
Yeah.
Yes. But I also found books about art history and so many other things. So I made all this kimono. That's How to Think Big. It's the thinking hats, because I found a lot of books on the how to. You know, how to be happy, how to make money, how to be
all
successful.
Kinds of self-help
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. The woman dressed for success. So I made a skirt. So you know, this is the piece as it ended up. So you have all the books up here that are folded, but if you open, for example, this is a cellulite.
That is so incredible.
Thank you. This is a cellulite book, so it's a pant that you put on.
So you just open the book and you get the clothes.
Yep. Yeah, so this is part of the Santa Barbara Museum of Art collection right now. So, you know, this is the way that they display it, and when I go there, I cannot touch it or anything. I belong to the museum now. But this is the way that they display it. So I cannot do the interactive type of thing. So you have.
It used to be interactive, wasn't it? In its first presentation.
Yes, absolutely. But once you have a piece, and this is the art history book. So you can fold this book, and it becomes a coffee table book. You fold it, and it looks like a book, and then you open it up, and it's a kimono. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that.
How did you attach them all together?
Well, it's a pH neutral glue that you use for bookmaking. It has a kimono inside, so you had it to. I did the sewing. Actually, friends of mine were sewing the kimonos for me. And then once you have a structure that it's extremely symmetrical, because a kimono is like a T, so you can fold it. Then I started attaching the pages, and so I have the color images outside and the text inside. And then the pockets, you have to figure out exactly where you want the pockets so they can fall into the book format.
Oh, wow.
So this is what I'm talking about, liberation in the sense of going beyond, the responsibility of, I think, like you said, I still look at the world in a particular way that I'm very concerned. I have a lot of issues I'm concerned. Yeah. But it was quite interesting to allow myself to do these things.
You had said, when you mentioned the romance novel,
yes,
and how you could some people, you read them and you toss them. What is, you have a certain fascination, I read, with paperback books.
Yes.
And using paperbacks. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I did a huge piece, this piece here. It's called Fantasy of Possession. And there are 1,400 paperback books that they're cut. Oh, here we have it. This is my... So the book, I don't know, can you imagine the rest of the book? So they're cut to the same size, and then I got rid of the top. I don't know why I selected this size, because I like it. And then I soaked them in water, and they turn into these wonderful fans. And so I made a temple out of the book. So all these are paperback books.
Oh my gosh.
And the remnants of the book made the floor. Now, you can pack this installation in a box, because, I have boards that are 8x4, so you can stack them up and go with installation. This idea was at the beginning when all of a sudden supermarkets, aside from selling food, nourishment and so forth, they were selling paperback books too. And, that really, whoa, what a concept, you get everything here at the supermarket. Right. And so that really, I started researching, and they're fast produced and fast consumed. It's a very inexpensive way of making a book. It gets consumed very quickly, especially love stories, so many other novels. And it was so easy to find in laundromats, and then people know that you work with books and they don't want to throw away their books, and so they bring them to you. The other thing that I wanted to say is you can recycle paper 3 times, because after the paper is being recycled 3 times, the fibers don't.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there is, although, we talk about recycling and so forth, but, at the end, they become trash. So that's what this piece was about, basically.
Does it make you sad, the concept of how we use paperback books, or?
Sad. Yeah, there is a concern. Of course, there is a concern about waste, but there's also I mean, there are people who like to read,
Right.
you know, this type of work. And that was very interesting for me, because when I was cutting the books, see, I had to stack them up and with a guillotine, you know, cut the books. And so, of course, you know, you start reading a little bit. And so they were very terrible, you know, love stories or novels that, I don't know, a lot of them had to be with love affair in hospitals and nurses and doctors. So, and I was, you know, I was sad. But on the other hand, I realized that there are people who really enjoy this genre, this kind of books. And so, and that's the nature of the book, you know, they are there to be consumed very quickly. And what really concerns me is the fact about recycling, you know, what we do with so much.
There was, if I could go back to the picture before, you had food, didn't you, in fruits?
Yes.
Does that have anything to do with the supermarket, tying that aspect in?
Well, it's the idea of consumption. You know, you get the book when you get the, you know, the food, and they get discarded like food, basically. However, and so you see here, that's the floor, and that's the column, the floor, and then at the end, whatever was the little pieces that I cut from here, which I think it was close to an inch, they became souvenirs.
Wow.
And so people took some of those books. The idea is when you work in an installation, it only exists for the moment that it's there, and then through documentation. And so I was giving this little, you know, souvenir in order to make the connection with the installation.
Was this one of the pieces from the original installation?
Yes, yeah. You can see how yellow is the paper.
Well, what books do you like to read? If it's not trashy romance novels, what is your favorite genre?
I might read a trashy
your
novel.
favorite book.
Well, I'm very eclectic in terms of reading. I read about art, and I always going to read about art. I think, an artist. I like to read about Latin American art too. I think I do a lot of research about that, and about artists from the third world, if we might say. But for example, from Africa and India, I think their artists are making such an interesting work. And I'm reading about the life of bees, the life of flowers. The way that I read, I think it's based on what kind of work I'm doing. And then I start digging and doing research. Of course, I love Borges, Jorge Borges, the Argentinian writer, and I have my Borges there. And then I read about, what I'm preparing for my classes too, installations, site-specific. But I'm very eclectic, very, very eclectic, and I love Latin American writers.
Are these the books here, the Borges books that you're mentioning?
Well, this is a magazine called Variaciones Borges, and that was part, and they're using my work for the cover, so I was, showing that. And now Variaciones Borges was here at the University of Iowa, the Borges Center, Borges, and now it's in Pittsburgh because of, Daniel Balderson, who's the person who was doing the book, it's now at the University of Pittsburgh. So they're using, Borges being a person who was so much involved with encyclopedias. For him, the encyclopedia was the world. And so they use my work as the cover for the
kind of a tribute to that. Great. Now, you had mentioned just a minute ago about researching bees.
Yes.
I found that so interesting that you are now working with honeycomb and wax and making sculptures from what bees left behind. And my question to you, and I'm sure you've heard this through your research with bees, how do you feel about with the decline of the honeybee populations in the United States and all over the world? Does that spark any kind of sadness, or what are your feelings towards that?
Oh, no, absolutely. I have to say that when I start working, maybe we should show this too.
Sounds good.
Yeah, this is a honey wax comb, and I made a whirl with the honey wax comb. And the idea was that, maps are so biased. And so I started making my own whirl, basically, with the Mercator map and so forth. Now, this piece, was made before we had the crisis of the bees and so forth. And I worked with a beekeeper in Argentina, and I became very interested in bees. And I had a sabbatical, so I went to work in Argentina. And I collected 250 honey wax combs from I think I have it here, from the beekeeper, because it gets to a point where the honey wax has to be recycled. They melt this wax, they clean it up, and they create another piece of, it's called stamp wax.
Okay.
So what they do is they have a pattern with the hexagons. And so then they put a queen, they take it into the beehive, and the queen starts building the cells.
That makes sense.
So all this wax was going to be recycled. And I saw it, and I saw, here you have it. I saw all the colors that you can have in the wax. And I might be wrong, but I think it has to do with the amount of sugar there is in.
Really?
Yeah. And so I bought 250 honey wax and cleaned them up, and
It's incredible.
All these pieces are sewn into. I have that's going to the mountains. This is the person I work with, and so that's in Mendoza, going to the mountains. And alfalfa, because some of the beehive were close to alfalfa, they have a different flavor, and those are with the bees. And so what I bought was the old part of the wax. And so this is my studio when I took all the honey wax. And so we cleaned them up, and they're there. And they're beautiful.
They are beautiful.
So I was so attracted to those. And that's the map. And then each piece is hand sewn into the structure. So, and then, when the problem with bees happened, of course, extremely sad. And
you must have developed such an intimate relationship with the bees.
And they're amazing. If you read about the life of the bees, they're extraordinary. And all this was before the movies and the whole Hollywood thing. But they are amazing in terms of how they have everything organized and how they work. They
communicate.
Oh yeah, and the dance, and also the beauty of what they do, the honey they produce, and so forth. So and what's really interesting too, reading and doing research about bees, if you leave a bee with water and food, because they need food, of course, but isolated from the community, the bee dies. So it's an insect that really needs the community. So of course, I was so, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen. It's really going to affect what we eat, and And so I was talking to a friend of mine, and they were saying now that maybe the satellites from phones, it's what it's affecting. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, there is a terrible sadness
that is an incredible project.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we had gone through some of the images before, some other materials that you've used. You've used chili peppers, mollusk shells, razor blades. What determines what you use? How do you decide that I'm going to do something with honeycombs? I'm going to do something with chili peppers. What do you?
Well, it depends. I don't think I'm very attracted to. I think sculpture is about textures and about materials, and that's what I tell my students. You have something that has weight, that it has a pattern, that you're working with space too. And so I think I have my radars for materials. When I worked with the mussel shells, and I did a piece called Embrace Me, and it's a figure all with mussel shells, made out of mussel shells. Of course, there's a structure underneath, and it's a suit. It's a men's suit that somehow through process got stiffened up, and then I put epoxy. All the shells are epoxy onto the structure. Now it's hollow, so you can see inside, and it has a black velvet. and it's called Embrace Me. And, you know, you really, I mean, you can project yourself in being inside. On the other hand, you know, people read in different ways that, you know, I want to get out of there. So this piece was because I was very attracted to the mussel shells. I have seen a show by Marcel Brothers, who it's a very wonderful artist that I look at his work, and he had used the mussel shells. And what he said is, when you think about the shell, is that, you know, they're so hard on the outside, and then you open it, and it really protects something that is soft. And I made this piece at a time that I was very vulnerable in terms of, you know, my life, what was going on, and so forth. And so I made the jacket, and it was wonderful to wear the jacket. My kids wore it too.
Really?
Yeah, and it felt like, you know, you feel so protected. And so from that, you know, I decided to do the pants, and I decided to do the shoes, and so it became Embrace Me. Now people call it the mussel man. I don't know why, but yeah, mussel shell man.
Mussel shell.
So that's how I, you know, got into the mussel shell with. Well, for example, this is a good example too. These are pistachio shells, and just playing with the pistachio. I guess it was a time that I was eating pistachios. I was eating. My students were, you know. I said, okay, here. So I kept the shells, and they're so interesting because. And I saw this in the mussel shells too. You know, you have one that goes to one side, and of course, obviously. Yeah. And so if you start playing around and you glue them and you put them one on top of each other, they create these really intricate shapes. And so I was attracted to the shape. Yeah. And then
and they look like little shrimp guys, little creatures, little crustaceans. They look organic in a sea life sense. They don't look like pistachio shells.
No, and that's the whole idea, you know, because and I think with my work, that, you know, you see something and you have to get closer to really...
Like these, we were talking about these before the interview. I think this is just incredible. There.
Thank you.
Is it Encyclopedia that made these?
Yeah, all these are Encyclopedia Britannica.
Because I had seen them in an image and thought that they were wood.
Yeah.
So I think that it just is...
Thank you.
Fascinating.
And, well, of course, you know, keeping my eyes open to books and the discarded books. Encyclopedia is a perfect example of, you know, knowledge getting obsolete, because you haven't, it's typical in a family where the kids have grown and they're out of the house. They have the encyclopedias, but they're so old and people don't know what to do. And so, recycle them, and you know, it's really hard to give away that object, you know, that hold the book. And so I have a lot of people giving me Encyclopedias Britannicas, and I have some from the university that the university discarded. Yeah, they have the University of Iowa stamp. And so this is a very complicated piece because I have hundreds of these little things. So what I do is I cut the encyclopedia in half.
Okay.
And then I make little tiny books, so they're glued in here. And then with wax, I wax page by page, and I do these curls. And then I cut them in the bandsaw, and I get these units. And I just had a show in San Francisco, and I'm able to create these forms, you know, on the walls and so forth. So you don't know what they are until you get closer. And you realize that there's text and these, you know, there are pages. Each page is put on top of the other page with the wax. And so, and again, you know, here I am working with wax. So I don't know if I got interested in bees because of the wax that I've been working with. So I think, you know, I'm very open to the world and what's out there and what attracts me, you know.
Are you ever specific, we had talked about in the example of designing the library that you had cellulite for the pants.
Yes.
Are you ever specific about what type of text you include in which sculptures?
Yes. Not in the universe, because in universe I think I get so many encyclopedias that I do, however, when I'm waxing the pages, which is a very, very intense activity. I mean, I spend hours waxing and waxing. And I found beautiful illustrations, and something, if you compare an encyclopedia from the 1960s to something that is a little more contemporary, we have less illustrations.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I never thought about that.
The same with dictionaries. In older dictionaries have a more illustration than and the quality of the paper. So so I do many times. I found images that I like, and I said, I'll keep this. So I have a whole collection of that. Now, in pieces like redesigning my library, yes, of course I do, and. I had, for example, the cellulite book. I had Women Dressed for Success, sewing, a book on sewing, in contrast to a book of art history that didn't include any women artists, or only a few. So, I was really playing with that oral communication, child psychology. So there were very, very specific books that...
I had seen one, you had made a bra.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't tell. I thought I could see feminism peeking out of one of the texts.
I think so. Yeah, that's called Read My Tits. So I don't know if you... Yeah.
Was that part of redesigning my library, or is that something?
No, that's something that I did, let's see, when... It was in a show last year in Argentina. But it was a fun piece, It's like defining the body in a way, and I found those little wonderful tops from a copper piece, and I said, these are great, they look like nipples. And then I said, I'm going to make a bra, and they turn, and so it's a piece that you wear, and so it's like reading the body, the textural body, and how we look at the body and so forth. But it's a piece that it appeared because I have a lot of dictionary pages that are wax and cut. I have sections. I mean, if you go to my studio, you find, little ones like that, and then dictionary paper that I like, because I look a lot into the quality of the paper. I don't take any paper. I mean, it's very difficult for me to work with paper that it's very glossy, because it doesn't absorb the material nice, and also because it's hard to fold. And so I like paper that absorbs the wax. And I like paper that, it's beautiful and it's thin and with good quality. So that is a piece that I will continue to do, because there are more pieces, in addition to that one. Yeah. And it was fun. People don't like that piece very much. But
I thought it was incredible.
I think men don't like it, but, but women, yeah.
There was another one that really caught my eye, and this kind of goes back to, I think it was a piece that was made a few years ago. It was the chair.
Oh, yeah.
The chair, the passion chair that was covered with chili peppers. And can you talk about that? Was that...
You picked the good ones, huh? The difficult ones.
Sorry.
No, not a difficult, but how can I say it? Well, that has to do with, the whole idea of being Latina, and how people project into the Latin idea. And that, spicy food, I mean, I think, you can say spicy food, passionate, and this and that. And so I kind of exaggerated, that idea. And in Argentina, we don't need spicy food. I mean, so, and I think it was like, many times say, well, your food, and, don't you miss your spicy food and so forth? And we don't eat spicy food. And I think it's just a kind of a reaction of, just people jumping into the idea that Latin America is the whole thing. And so I had that chair, and I wanted to do a passion chair, kind of making, reference to that stereotyping of Latinas are hot and so forth. Right. And a lot of alternative spaces have charity shows.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And so they asked artists to produce a chair, and then they had an auction, and they sell the chair. So they asked me to make a chair, and so I did that chair. But I think a lot of my work is very interesting because of the interaction that I have with for example, I was going to the Mexican market to buy chili peppers, and the dialogue that goes there, and so they were asking me, what are you making with so much chile? What kind of food? I said, you always debate, what should I say? And so I said, well, I'm an artist and I'm working on a passion chair. And so the guy said, passion, cabrones, silla de cabrones, because it was a word played in Spanish. So that was kind of interesting. But that, I mean, the pieces that you saw, the razor blades, the chair, the mussel shells, those are from a period that I think the pieces are very, very connected to me as a woman. And
Right.
yeah.
There was the other, the casa, the house.
Yes, with honey.
It was the corn husks and the honey wax. What about that one? Is that, how did that, with a name like house, home, how did that really speak to you as a woman and as a person?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In that period, I think I was naming my pieces in Spanish and English. You know, I always debated what should I do, and you know, your mother tongue is your mother tongue, and so home in English or casa in Spanish sound different to me. But you know, going to the market and so forth, the corn husks are beautiful pieces of material for me, and so once you dip them in wax, they turn into these round, beautiful shapes. And so I made this piece. It's a shirt, and it's probably about 6 feet tall. It has a wire structure, and then outside I have the corn husks, you know, put outside. And it's in a base. See, my work is so everything it's very studied. The base has copper. It's mounted on copper, and so you have the pieces dipped in honey wax or beeswax, right, which is kind of yellowy. Then the light reflecting the copper and then reflecting onto the corn husks, which are dipped in beeswax. So if you look inside, you have this. It almost looks like honey. You know, it looks very homey.
Warm.
Exactly. When I was a kid, we went to, you know, for vacations with my family. We had a huge family. We went to the northern province of San Luis. And they were cornfields. And I remember running, you know, all the kids, we ran through the cornfields looking up. So it kind of referred to that. And that was made in 1996. And I came to Iowa in 97 before. So this is the last piece I made before coming to Iowa, which is like, okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
So, but that was, you know, my connection to home.
You just mentioned coming to Iowa.
Yeah.
Was that difficult for you to do that thousands of miles journey to come to the center of the country when you had been in California for so long?
No.
Or were you excited?
No, very excited. I'm very adventurous. Yeah. You know, things happen. I went to a conference and I had my portfolio, and a colleague of mine was sitting there. He took the portfolio and said, you know, we're going to be looking for someone. So a year passed, and then I applied for a tenure track job, and I went to the interview. Actually, this is very interesting. The day before coming to the interview as a finalist here, I was hit by a car.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and so nothing happened to me,
good.
thank God. Yeah, but I was in San Francisco and a car ran at a red light, and so I was thrown 40 feet.
Oh my gosh.
So I wake up
and nothing happened to you?
Nothing happened. No, I don't know. I mean, I had vertigo and a small fracture, hairline fracture, but other than that, perfect. So I said, oh, okay, bye Iowa. I'm not making it because I was in the hospital. And they postponed my interview for about, I think, a month or something like that, and they sent me flowers. It was very,
my gosh,
oh yeah.
really?
I have a very, very warm department.
They were definitely courting you.
I think so.
Very sweet.
So it was interesting because, you know, I said, well, and then when I was getting ready to come to Iowa, my kids didn't want to come with me, so they decided to stay with their dad. And I said, okay. So I crossed the country. You know, I drove here, and I don't know, I took it as an adventure, and I never been to the Midwest, and I think it's beautiful. I mean, I love the prairie, I love the snow, I love the seasons, I love all the things that you can grow in the garden, which is amazing. So, of course, I miss the ocean, and I miss Santa Barbara. It was very difficult I was a single parent, and so to support my family. And I was working for the museum and then working as an artist, and it was tough. So I decided to come to Iowa, and I, as I said, you know, I took it as an adventure, and I moved from Argentina to the United States, so moving to Iowa.
Piece of cake.
Well, I think so, you know, and I like the flexibility. I think it's always important to be open to other places and to see. And so, it was different, of course, but, you know, you have to see. I mean, I'm here, and I have a lot of time to work in my studio, The university is very generous with us in terms. We have a studio with air conditioning and heating and all the facilities. I have the summers where I can work in my studio. So my work has really changed in the sense that I have a lot more time to put into the studio. So.
Now you mentioned that you're a single mother. Do you have 2 children?
Yeah, a daughter and a son.
How was that, having to balance your art and work and being a mom? How did you do it? How did you make it all work together?
Just do it, like the Nike. Well, you have to do it. You have to do it. I did it. I mean, I needed to survive, and you need to provide for your kids. So you do it. And then I was very young too. I have my daughter when I was 21. Now I'm a grandmother, so it's like, yeah. So it's kind of, you do it. You have the energy, you have to do it. The other thing is I work for the Museum of Art a lot of the time that, when I was a single parent. So my kids came with me. And they took art classes, and they were junior docents at the museum. And
oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Cool. Oh, yeah. I took them to work with me. And they became part of my work. They became part of my work. And I remember when we were moving from Santa Barbara to, I was getting ready to come here, we were packing the house, and they would come and say, "Mom, is this art or trash?" So they were all the time so connected to all the things that I was doing. So, that was easier, I guess, in the sense that they were so involved in what I was doing too.
Now we're just about out of time, but I wanted to touch on one more thing. You had mentioned doing work with the museum, and you had also done some outreach work with the museum, and also I believe with the school in Santa Barbara High School. What kind of things did you do with the outreach to the community?
I was the outreach coordinator. Actually, the title was Multicultural Outreach Coordinator, which, it's like multicultural, okay. So, but my job was to bring the Latino community or the African American community and the communities that didn't attend the museum, because, it's always the problem that you have a museum, but very limited public during the time that I was working in the museum. So I created programs. I did a mural project, and all the students who were youth at risk were paid and taught on how to paint. And I did a lot of fundraising, and so we found the money, and the program continues to go. So every summer there are a group of students who paint a mural, and it's displayed in the museum. And then working with kids, making tiles and I miss that a lot. I mean, it's like really wonderful to be able to work in the community. So anyway.
Well, is there anything else that you want to share with the University of Iowa community before we wrap up? Any other pieces that you want to touch on?
No, I think we talked a lot.
We did.
Yeah. So, well, thank you.
I can't thank you enough for having us on here, or for coming onto our show with us. It was really a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone for having me here.
Of course. And thank you for tuning in.